Won't dry off, keeps flowing.
Won't dry off, keeps flowing. Won't dry off, keeps flowing. Won't dry off, keeps flowing.
So hello and welcome after the somewhat long break. Today's film is going to be about the usage of different tenses, especially the ones with a perfective aspect. So the present perfect, future perfect, and the past perfect tenses. Let's start with present perfect tense. So have a good look. If need be, just pause the recording, think hard about which tenses to use, and only then just go on to find out what the right answers should be. All the reported cases of lynx poaching occurred prior to the setting of a Mayo Reserve. Since the Mayo Reserve was set up, no lynx have been killed or no cases of lynx poaching have occurred or something similar. So, yeah, the hardest bit here, it's not that hard, but it's quite logical actually, but Mr. Krzyżanowski chooses to test it very often, is the fact that if since is followed by a clause, it's always in the past simple tense. It's logical. Since a moment in the past, so since the Mayo Reserve was set up. And the main clause, as you probably know, should have the present perfect tense. Similarly, żadna terapia, żadna pomoc psychologiczna nie mogą sprawić, żeby te dzieci zapomniały całe zło, które ich spotkało, które chyba je spotkało, odkąd musiały opuścić swój kraj. So no therapy, no psychological help can make those kids forget all the bad things that have happened to them since they had to leave the country. So once again, since they had to leave the country, preceded by a present perfect tense. So all the bad things that have happened to them. How do we know it's not the past perfect tense and not like the present perfect that should be used here? Well, żadna pomoc psychologiczna nie mogą sprawić. So we are talking about the present situation here, and once you've noticed that, it's just a little bit easier. Once again, what has made nearly 5 million people visit the museum since it opened in 2004. So not just what made, we're talking about like the time between 2004, a moment in the past when the museum opened, and now, the moment of speaking. So what has made nearly 5 million people visit the museum since it opened. Right, now we've got a lovely combo. There will be two perfect tenses to use here. Linguists at the recent Congress in Seattle have warned that half of all human languages will have disappeared by the end of a century as smaller societies are assimilated into national and global cultures. Losing this linguistic diversity will be a blow not only for cultural studies but also for cognitive science, they say. Okay, how did I know to use the present perfect with a first verb? Okay, because it's preceded by recent. Recently, does it ring any bells? It just means that we are talking about something that has only just happened, and hence the present perfect tense should be used. All human languages will have disappeared by the end of a century, on the other hand, is pretty easy to see through, so to say, because it's used with by, and most good Polish learners of English know that when you've got by in a sentence discussing the future perfect tense should be used. Also, as smaller societies are assimilated into national and global cultures, you might have thought of using the present continuous tense or the future tense, right? But the present simple tense is a little bit more logical. We are talking about a future act, a future event in a time clause, as here means while or something similar. Like, well, I think the present continuous tense wouldn't have been wrong, but the future tense would have. So you're advised against using that because of the fact that this is a time clause, zdanie czasowe. gdzie nigdy nie używamy czasów przyszłych. I think this example has already been used in a video about passive voice, strona bierna. So we keep being told by experts, if nothing is done about sugar and fruit drinks, in 30 years' time the majority of today's children will have developed diabetes. So if nothing is done, because it's a conditional clause, so just like in time clauses, in conditionals, zdania warunkowe, we're not allowed to use future tenses in the future meaning. And I'd like to use this example to show you that the future perfect tenses are not just used with by or until. They are also used in cases where you want to emphasize the completion of a certain action before a point in the future. If you have a good look at it and have a good think about this, it's not just going to happen overnight. It's going to happen within the period of the next 30 years. And when we fast forward to 30 years from now, they will all have diabetes, so they will have developed it by that point. The next one is quite similar in that respect. So most young are born in April or May, so in June the females will be on the lookout for potential threats to the puppies and almost impossible to be spotted. It's a paraphrase, as you can see. Don't go in June. If you go in June, the females will have given birth to the puppies and will be extremely difficult targets for your camera. So once again, there is no by here, but there is a strong suggestion that it is going to happen before a certain point, before June or by June. So if you go in June, the females will have given birth by then. A little bit tricky, but if you have a reasonably good understanding of how the future perfect tense works or how perfective tenses work in general, it shouldn't pose much of a problem. Moving on to the past perfect territory now. Kramer's great 1965 movie Ship of Fools was another peak in his career, which started in 1948 with Champion. And it's one of those infamous examples, or notorious examples, that Mr. Krzyżanowski likes to include, where you have to use your mathematical skills to, solve the problem. Now, if you have a good look, your paraphrase is meant to end with over 15 years, and the stretch of time between 1948 and 1965 is just that, it's over 15 years. So, Ship of Fools was the work of an accomplished artist who, at that point, had been making films for over 15 years. If there's a situation when the past perfect continuous tense should be used, it's just that. So at that point, when he made Ship of Fools, he had been making movies for over 15 years, so he was quite experienced because of that. The next one's pretty tricky, not just because of the tense use, but also because of logical decisions you need to take. So have a good long look at it before you make your decisions. For obvious reasons, the operations had been kept secret for weeks until the last commando withdrew, or was withdrawn. Then, after a few months, it was leaked into the media. Right, the operation had been kept secret for weeks before a certain point, until the last commando withdrew or was withdrawn. Now, the answer key says that you could have used both of these. So the last commander withdrew on their own accord or was withdrawn by the army. But it's followed by, after a few months, it was leaked into the media, not just leaked into the media. Admittedly, it's slightly more logical this way, because first it had actively been kept secret by the officials, and then when all the soldiers were safe, it was leaked to the media on purpose, rather than it just accidentally happened. Right. We were given a choice of guides and chose the one who had lived in that place for a decade or so and could be expected to know its attractions. Had lived or had been living with, I don't know. Well, let's just say that the more old school native speakers of English would have used the past perfect tense, and this is the one that Mr. Krzyżanowski advises you to use. And a pretty long example about some past events, so a past narration. At the clinic, the tests took longer than we had been told they would. We had been told before, right? As a result, we were at the antique shop a little late and they were closing soon. But the grey-haired owner told us to wait and said we would inspect the manuscripts after closing. Now, I'd like to comment on two verb forms. They were closing soon and we would inspect the manuscripts after closing. These are examples of the so-called future in the past. So normally, like, okay, we're coming somewhere and they're closing soon. So they're planning to close soon, in other words. But you have to use the past variant of that because it's a past narration and we're not allowed to use any present or future tenses. And similarly, not we will inspect, but we would inspect because it's preceded by he said, so it's reported speech. Right, and the two last examples, as you can see, are just multiple choice ones. When I saw this hardened cynic was being so sentimental, I got suspicious. What is he up to? So he was being sentimental, meaning he was acting in a sentimental way. Don't be afraid to use the present continuous form of the verb be when you're commenting on someone's actions or behavior rather than the nature. So you are silly means I think you're a silly person. You are being silly means you're acting in a silly way. Well, some of the stories that he would tell us at lunch could have been blended from the adventures of people he had worked with. We enjoyed them very much. Would is an equivalent of used to when talking about past events that got repeated over and over again, that were habitual. And I'm sure you have discussed that in your English language lessons. So you should have known that has told, has been telling were not really options because of the fact that there is no relevance to the present of the events described by the example, and would have told could suggest that it never happened while it did. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to meet you soon.